This is a reading of Terry Pratchett's Going Postal, a part of the Discworld series. There may be names and words in this that I am not pronouncing correctly. I am not a native English speaker, and this is a fantasy novel. So there may be words that I am not pronouncing the way they were intended to. I am pronouncing them as best I can. The 9,000-Year Prologue. The flotillas of the dead sailed around the world on underwater rivers. Very nearly nobody knew about them, but the theory is easy to understand. It runs, the sea is, after all, in many respects, only a wetter form of air. After all, and it is known that air is heavier the lower you go, and the lighter the higher you fly. As a storm-tossed ship founders and sinks, therefore it must reach a depth where the water below is just viscous enough to stop its fall. In short, it stops sinking and ends up floating on an underwater surface beyond the reach of the storms but far above the ocean floor. It's calm there, dead calm. Some stricken ships have rigging, some even have sails. Many still have crew tangled in the rigging or lashed to the wheel. But the voyages still continue aimlessly with no harbor in sight, because there are currents under the ocean, and so the dead ships with their skeleton crews sail on around the world, over sunken cities and between drowned mountains, until rot and shipworms eat them away, and they disintegrate. Sometimes an anchor drops all the way to the dark, cold calmness of the abyssal plain and disturbs the stillness of centuries by throwing up a cloud of silt. One nearly hit Anghamarad, where he sat watching the ships drift by far overhead. He remembered it, because it was the only really interesting thing to happen in the last 9,000 years. The 1 month prologue. There was this disease that the clacksmen got. It was like the illness known as calenture, which sailors experienced when, after having been becalmed for weeks under a pitiless sun, they suddenly believed that the ship was surrounded by green fields and stepped overboard. Sometimes the clacksmen thought they could fly. There was about 8 miles between the big Sephirmore towers, and when you were at the top, you were maybe 150 feet above the plains. Work up there too long without a hat on, they said, and the tower you were on got taller and the nearest tower got closer, and maybe you thought you could jump from one another or ride on the invisible messages sleeting between the towers, or perhaps you thought you were the message. Perhaps, as some said, all this was nothing more than a disturbance in the brain caused by the wind in the rigging. No one knew for sure. People who step onto the air 150 feet above the ground seldom have much to discuss afterwards. The tower shifted gently in the wind, but that was okay. There were lots of new designs in this tower. It stored the wind to power its mechanisms. It bent rather than broke. It acted more like a tree than a fortress. You could build most of it on the ground and raise it into a place in an hour. It was a thing of grace and beauty, and it could send messages up to 4 times faster than the old towers, thanks to the new shutter system and the colored lights. At least, it would be able to, once they sorted out a few lingering problems. The young man climbed swiftly to the very top of the tower. For most of the way, he was in clinging grey morning mist, and then, where he was rising through glorious sunlight, the mist spreading below him all the way to the horizon like a sea. He paid the view no attention. He'd never dreamed of flying. He dreamed of mechanisms, of making things work better than they'd done before. Right now he wanted to find out what was making the new shutter array stick again. He oiled the slitters, checked the tension on the wires, and then swung himself out over the fresh air to check the shutters themselves. It wasn't what you were supposed to do, but every linesman knew it was the only way you'd get things done. Anyway, it was perfectly safe of you. There was a clink. He looked back and saw a snap hook of his safety rope lying on the walkway, saw the shadow, felt a terrible pain in his fingers, heard the scream, and dropped like an anchor. Chapter 1. The Angel, in which our hero experiences hope, the greatest gift, the bacon sandwich of regret, somber reflections and capital punishment from the hangman, famous last words, our hero dies, angel's conversations about inadvisability of misplaced offers regarding broomsticks, an unexpected ride, a world free of honest men, a man on the hop. There's always a choice. They say that the prospect of being hanged in the morning concentrates a man's mind wonderfully. Unfortunately, what the mind inevitably concentrates on is that in the morning it will be a body that is going to be hanged. The man going to be hanged had been named Moist von Lipwig by doting, if rather unwise, parents, but he was not going to embarrass the name insofar as that was still possible, by being hung under it. To the world in general, and particularly on that bit of it known as the death warrant, he was Alfred Spangler. He took a more positive approach to the situation and had concentrated his mind on the prospect of not being hanged in the morning, and most particularly on the prospect of removing all the crumbling mortar from around the stone in his cell wall with a spoon. So far, the work had taken him 5 weeks and reduced the spoon to something like a nail file. Fortunately, no one ever came to change the bedding here, or else they would have discovered the world's heaviest mattress. It was a large and heavy stone that was currently the object of his intentions, and at some point a huge staple had been hammered into it as an anchor for manacles. Moist sat down facing the wall, gripped the iron ring in both hands, braced his legs against the stones on either side, and heaved. His shoulders caught fire and a red mist filled his vision, but the block slid out with a faint and inappropriate tinkling noise. Moist managed to ease it away from the pole and peered inside. At the far end was another block, and the mortar around it looked suspiciously strong and fresh. Just in front of it was a new spoon. It was shiny. As he studied it, he heard the clapping behind him. He turned his head, tendons twanging a little riff of agony, and saw several of the wardens watching him through the bars. "Well done, Mr. Spangler," said one of them. "Ron here owes me $5. I told him you were a sticker." "He's a sticker," I said. "You set this up, did you, Mr. Wilkinson?" said Moist weakly, watching the glint of light on the spoon. "Oh, not us, sir. Lord Veterinary's orders. He insists that all condemned prisoners should be offered the prospect of freedom." "Freedom? But there's a damn great stone through here." "Yes, there's that, sir. Yes, there is that," said the warden. "It's only the prospect, you see, not actual free freedom as such." That'd be a bit daft, eh?" "I suppose so," said Moist. "He didn't say, 'you bastards.'" The wardens had treated him quite civilly these past 6 weeks, and he made a point of getting on with people. He was very, very good at it. People skills were part of his stock in trade. In fact, they were nearly the whole of it. Besides, these people had big sticks. "So, speaking carefully," he added, "some people might consider this cruel, Mr. Wilkinson." "Yes, sir, we asked him about that, sir, but he said no, it wasn't. He said it provided," his forehead wrinkled, "occupational therapy. Healthy exercise, prevented moping, and over the greatest of all treasures, which is hope, sir." "Hope," muttered Moist glumly. "Not upset, are you, sir?" "Upset? Why should I be upset, Mr. Wilkinson? Only the last bloke we had in this cell, he managed to get down that drain, sir. Very small man, very agile." Moist looked at the little grit in the floor. He dismissed it out of hand. "Does it lead to the river?" he said. The warden grinned. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? He was really upset when we fished him out. Nice to see you entered into the spirit of the thing, sir. You've been an example to all of us, sir, the way you kept going. Stuffing all the dust in your mattress. Very clever, very tidy, very neat. It really cheered us up having you in here. By the way, Mrs. Wilkinson says thanks very much for the fruit basket. Very posh it is. It's got kumquats even." "Don't mention it, Mr. Wilkins." The warden was a bit green about the kumquats, because he only got dates in his, but I told him, sir, that fruit baskets is like life. Until you got pineapple off of the top, you never know what's underneath. He says thank you, too." "Glad he liked it, Mr. Wilson," said Moist absent-mindedly. Several of his former landladies had brought in presents for the poor, confused boy, and Moist always invested in generosity. A career like his was all about style, after all. "On that general subject, sir," said Mr. Wilkinson, "me and the lads were wondering if you might like to unburden yourself at this point in time on the subject of the whereabouts of the place where the location of the spot is where, not to beat about the bush, you hid all that money you stole." The jail went silent. Even the cockroaches seemed to be listening. "No, I couldn't do that, Mr. Wilkinson," said Moist loudly after a decent pause for dramatic effect. He tapped his jacket pocket and held up a finger and winked. The warders grinned back. "We understand totally, sir. Now I'd get some rest if I was you, sir, because we're hanging you in half an hour," said Mr. Wilkinson. "Hey, I don't get breakfast." Breakfast isn't until 7 o'clock, sir," said the ward reproachfully. "But tell you what, I'll do you a bacon sandwich, because it's you, Mr. Spangler." And now it was a few minutes before dawn, and it was him being led down the short corridor and out into the little room under the scaffold. Moist realized he was looking at himself from a distance, as if part of himself was floating outside his body like a child's balloon, ready, as it were, for him to let go of the string. The room was lit by light coming through cracks in the scaffold floor above, and significantly from around the edges of the large trap door. The hinges of said door were being carefully oiled by a man in a hood. He stopped when he saw the party had arrived and said, "Good morning, Mr. Spangler." He raised the hood helpfully. "It's me, Sir Daniel, one-drop trooper. I'm your executioner for today, sir. Don't you worry, sir. I've hanged dozens of people. We'll soon have you out of here." "Is it true that if a man isn't hanged after 3 attempts, he's reprieved, Dan?" said Moist, as the executioner carefully wiped his hands on a rag. "So I've heard, sir, so I've heard. But they don't call me one drop for nothing, sir. And will sir be having a black bag today?" "Will it help?" "Some people thinks it makes them look more dashing, and it stops that pop-eye look. It's more of a crowd thing, really. Quite a big one out there this morning. Nice piece about you in the Times yesterday, I thought. All them people saying what a nice young man you were and everything. Would you mind signing the rope beforehand, sir? I mean, I won't have a chance to ask you afterwards, eh?" "Signing the rope," said Moist. "Yes, sir," said the hangman. "It's sort of a traditional. There's a lot of people out there who buy old rope, specialist collectors, you could say. A bit strange, but, well, it takes all sorts, eh? Worth more signed, of course." He flourished a length of stout rope. "I got a special pen that signs on rope. One signature every couple of inches. Straightforward signature, no dedication needed. Worth money to me, sir. I'm very grateful." "So grateful that you won't hang me, then," said Moist, taking the pen. This got an appreciative laugh. Mr. Trooper watched him sign along the length, nodding happily. "Well done, sir. That's my pension plan you're signing there. Now, are we ready, everyone?" "Not me," said Moist quickly, to another round of general amusement. "You're a card, Mr. Spangler," said Mr. Wilkinson. "It won't be the same without you around, that is the truth." "Not for me, at any rate," said Moist. This was, once again, treated like rapier wit. Moist sighed. "Do you really think all this deters crime, Mr. Trooper?" he said. "Well, in the generality of things, I'd say it's hard to tell, given that it's hard to find evidence of crimes not committed," said the hangman, giving the trapdoor a final rattle. "But in the specificalities, sir, I'd say it's very efficacious." "Meaning what?" said Moist. "Meaning I've never seen someone up here more than once, sir. Should we go?" There was a stir when they climbed up into the chilly morning air, followed by a few boos and even some applause. People were strange like that. Steal $5 and you're a petty thief. Steal thousands of dollars and you're either a government or a hero. Moist stared ahead while the roll call of his crimes was read out. He couldn't help feeling that this was unfair. He'd never so much as tapped someone on the head. He'd never even broken down a door. He had picked locks on occasion, sure, but he'd always locked them again afterwards behind him. Apart from all the repossessions, bankruptcies, and sudden insolvencies, what had he actually done that was bad as such? He'd only been moving numbers around. "A nice crowd turned out today," said Mr. Trooper, tossing the end of the rope over the beam and busying himself with the knots. "Lots of press, too. What gallows covers them all, of course, and there's the Times and the Pseudopolis Herald, probably because of that bank what collapsed there, and I heard there's a man from the Stowe Plains dealer, too. Very good financial section. I always keep an eye on used rope prices out there. Looks like a lot of people want to see your debt, sir." Moist was aware that a black coach had drawn up at the rear of the crowd. There was no coat of arms on the door, unless you were in on the secret, which was that Lord Veterinary's coat of arms featured a sable shield. Black on black. You had to admit the bastard had style. What? He said in response to a nudge. I asked you if you have any last words, Mr. Spangler, said the hangman. It's customary. I wonder if you might have any thought of this. I wasn't actually expecting to die, said Moist. And that was it. He really hadn't, until now. He'd been certain something would turn up. A good one, sir, said Mr. Wilkinson. We'll go with that, shall we? Moist narrowed his eyes. The curtain on a coach window had twitched. The coach door had opened. Hope, that greatest of all treasures, ventured a slight glitter. No, they are not my actual last words, he said. Let me think. A slight clerk-like figure was descending from the coach. It's not as bad a thing I do now. Aha! It all made some kind of sense. Veterinary was out to scare him, that was it. That would be just like the man from what Moist had heard. There was going to be a reprieve. Down below, the clerk was having difficulty getting through the press of people. Do you mind speeding up a bit, Mr. Spangler, said the hangman. Fair's fair, eh? I want to get it right, said Moist haughtily, watching the clerk negotiate his way around a large troll. Yes, but there's a limit, sir, said the hangman, annoyed of this breach of etiquette. Otherwise you could go, for days. Short and sweet, sir. That's the style. Right, said Moist. Oh, look, see that man there, waving at you? The hangman glanced down at the clerk, who'd struggled to front the crowd. I bring a message from Lord Veterinary, the man shouted. Right, said Moist. He says to get on with it, it's long past dawn, said the clerk. Oh, said Moist, staring at the black coach. That damn Veterinary had a warder's sense of humour, too. Come on, Mr. Spangler, you don't want me to get into trouble, do you? Said the hangman, patting him on the shoulder. Just a few words, then we can all get on with our lives. Present company excepted, obviously. So this was it. It was, in some strange way, rather liberating. You didn't have to fear the worst that could happen anymore, because this was it, and it was nearly over. The warder had been right. What you had to do in life was get past the pineapple, Moist told himself. It was big and sharp and knobbly, but there might be peaches underneath. It was a myth to live by, and so, right now, totally useless. In that case, said Moist von Lipwig, I commend my soul to any god that can find it. Nice, said the hangman with a nod, and pulled the lever. Alfred Spangler died. It was generally agreed that they had been good last words. Ah, Mr. Lipwig, said a distant voice getting closer. I see you are awake and still alive at the present time. There was a slight inflection to that last phrase, which told Moist that the length of the present time was entirely in the gift of the speaker. He opened his eyes, for he was sitting in a comfortable chair. At a desk opposite him, sitting with his hands steepled reflectively in front of his pursed lips, was Lord Havelock Veterinary, under whose idiosyncratically despotic rule Ankh-Morpork had become a city where, for some reason, everyone had wanted to live. An ancient animal sense also told Moist that all the people were standing behind the comfortable chair, and that it could very quickly become extremely uncomfortable should he make any sudden movements. But they couldn't be as terrible as the thin, black-robed man with the fuzzy little beard and the pianist's hands who was watching him. Shall I tell you about angels, Mr. Lipwig? The patrician said pleasantly. I know 2 interesting facts about them. Moist grunted. There was no obvious escape route in front of him, and turning around was, out of the question. His neck ached horribly. Oh yes, you were hanged, said Veterinary. A very precise science, hanging. Mr. Trooper is a master at it. The slippage and thickness of the rope, whether the knot is placed here rather than there, the relationship between weight and distance. Oh, I'm sure that man could write a book. You were hanged to within an inch of your life, I understand. Only an expert standing right next to you would have spotted that, and in this case the expert was our friend Mr. Trooper. No, Alfred Spangler is dead, Mr. Lipwig. 300 people would swear they saw him die. He leaned forward. And so, appropriately, it is of angels that I wish to speak of you now. Moist managed a grunt. The first interesting thing about angels, Mr. Lipwick, is that sometimes, very rarely, at a point in a man's career where he has made such a foul and tangled mess of his life that death appears to be the only sensible option, an angel appears to him, or, I should say, onto him, and offers him a chance to go back to the moment when it all went wrong and this time do it right. Mr. Lipwick, I should like you to think of me as an angel. Moist stared. He felt the snap of the rope, the choke of the noose. He'd seen the blackness welling up. He died. I'm offering you a job, Mr. Lipwick. Alfred Spangler is buried, but Mr. Lipwick has a future. It may, of course, be a very short one if he is stupid. I am offering you a job, Mr. Lipwick. Work for wages. I realize the concept may be unfamiliar to you. Only as a form of hell, Moist thought. The job is that of Postmaster General of the Ankh-Morpork Post Office. Moist continued to stare. May I just add, Mr. Lipwick, that behind you there is a door. If at any time in this interview you feel to leave, you only have to step through it and you will never hear from me again. Moist filed that under deeply suspicious. To continue, the job, Mr. Lipwick, involves the refurbishment and running of the city's postal services, preparation of the international packets, maintenance of the post office property, etc., etc. If you stick a broom up my arse, I could probably sweep the floor too, said a voice. Moist realized that it was his own. His brain was a mess. It had come as a shock to him that the afterlife was this one. Lord Vetinari gave him a long look. Well, if you wish, he said, and turned to a hovering clerk. Drumknot, does the housekeeper have a store cupboard on this floor, do you know? Yes, my lord, said the clerk. Shall I? It was a joke, Moist burst out. Oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't realized it, Lord Vetinari, turning back to Moist. Do tell me if you feel obliged to make another one, will you? Look, said Moist, I don't know what's happening here, but I don't know anything about delivering post. Mr. Lipwick, this morning you had no experience at all of being dead, and yet, but for my intervention, you would nevertheless have turned out to be extremely good at that, said Lord Vetinari sharply. It just goes to show you never know until you try. But when you sentenced me... Vetinari raised a pale hand. Ah? He said. Moist's brain, at last aware that it needed to do some work here, stepped in and replied, when you sentenced Alfred Spangler. Well done, do carry on. You said he was a natural-born criminal, fraudster by vocation, habitual liar and perverted genius and totally untrustworthy. Are you accepting my offer, Mr. Lipwick? Said Vetinari sharply. Moist looked at him. Excuse me, he said, standing up. I'd just like to check something. There were two men dressed in black standing behind his chair. It wasn't a particularly neat black, more the black worn by people who just don't want little marks to show. They looked like clerks, until you met their eyes. They stood aside as Moist walked toward the door, which, as promised, was indeed there. He opened it very carefully. There was nothing beyond, and that included a floor. In that manner of one who was going to try all possibilities, he took the remnant of the spoon out of his pocket and let it drop. It was quite a long time before he heard the jingle. Then he went back and sat in the chair. The prospect of freedom, he said. Exactly, said Lord Vetinari. There is always a choice. You mean I could choose certain death? A choice, nevertheless, said Vetinari. Or perhaps an alternative. You see, I believe in freedom, Mr. Lipwick. Not many people do, although they will, of course, protest otherwise. And no practical definition of freedom would be completely without the freedom to take the consequences. Indeed, it is the freedom upon which all the others are based. Now, will you take the job? No one will recognize you, I'm sure. No one ever recognizes you, it would appear. Moist shrugged. Oh, all right, of course I accept as a natural-born criminal, habitual liar, fraudster, and totally untrustworthy, perverted genius. Capital! Welcome to government service, said Lord Vetinari, extending his hand. I pride myself on being able to pick the right man. The wage is $20 a week, and I believe the Postmaster General has the use of a small apartment in the main building. I think there's a hat, too. I shall require a regular report. Good day. He looked down at his paperwork. He looked up. You appear to still be here, Postmaster General. And "Then that's it," said Moist, aghast. "1 minute I'm being hanged, and the next minute you're employing me?" "Let me see. Yes, I think so. Oh, no, of course. Drumnut, do give Mr. Lipwick his keys." The clerk stepped forward, handed Moist a huge rusted keyring full of keys, and proffered a clipboard. "Sign here, please, Postmaster General," he said. "Hold on a minute," Moist thought. "There is only one city. It's got gates. It's completely surrounded by different directions to run. Does it matter what I sign?" "Certainly," he said, and scribbled his name. "Your correct name, if you please," said the veterinary, not looking up from his desk. "What name did he sign?" "Drumnut." The clerk craned his head. "Ethel Snake, my lord, as far as I can make out." "Do try to concentrate, Mr. Lipwick," said the veterinary, warily, still apparently reading the paperwork. Moist signed again. After all, what would it matter in the long run? And it would certainly be a long run if he couldn't find a horse. "And that only leaves the matter of your parole officer," said Lord Veterinary, still engrossed in the paper before him. "Parole officer?" "Yes, I'm not completely stupid, Mr. Lipwick. He will meet you outside the post office building in 10 minutes. Good day." When Moist had left, Drumnut coughed politely and said, "Do you think he'll turn up there, my lord?" "One must always consider the psychology of the individual," said Veterinary, correcting the spelling on an official report. "That is what I do all the time, and lamentably, Drumnut, you do not always do. That is why he has walked off with your pencil. Always move fast. You never know what's catching you up." 10 minutes later, Moist von Lipwick was well outside the city. He'd bought a horse, which was a bit embarrassing, but the speed had been of essence, and he had only had time to grab one of his emergency stashes from its secret hiding place and pick up a skinny old screw from the bargain box in Hobson's livery stable. At least, it did mean no irate citizen going to the watch. No one had bothered him, no one had looked at him twice, no one ever did. The city gates had indeed been wide open. The plains lay ahead of him, full of opportunity, and he was good at parlaying nothing into something. For example, at the first little town he came to, he'd go to work on this old nag with a few simple techniques and ingredients that'd make it worth twice the price he'd pay for it. At least for about 20 minutes, or until it rained. 20 minutes would be enough time to sell it, and with any luck pick up a better horse worth slightly more than asking price. He'd do it again at the next town, and in 3 days, maybe 4, he'd have a horse worth owning. But that would be just a sideshow, something to keep his hand in. He'd got 3 very nearly diamond rings sewn into the lining of his coat, a real one in a secret pocket in the sleeve, and a very nearly gold dollar sewn cunningly into the collar. These were to him what his saw and hammer are to a carpenter. They were primitive tools, but they'd put it back in the game. There's a saying, "You can't fool an honest man," which is much quoted by people who make a profitable living by fooling honest men. Moist never tried it, knowingly anyway. If you did fool an honest man, he tended to complain to the local watch, and these days they were harder to buy off. Fooling dishonest men was a lot safer and somehow more sporting. And of course, there were so many of them, you hardly had to aim. Half an hour after arriving in the town of Hapley, where the big city was a tower of smoke on the horizon, he was sitting outside an inn, downcast, with nothing in the world but a genuine diamond ring worth $100 and a pressing need to get home to Genua, where his poor aged mother was dying of gnats. 11 minutes later, he was standing patiently outside a jeweler's shop, inside which the jeweler was telling a sympathetic citizen that the ring the stranger was prepared to sell for $20 was worth $75. Even jewelers have to make a living. And 35 minutes later, he was riding out on a better horse, with $5 in his pocket, leaving behind a gloating, sympathetic citizen who, despite having been bright enough to watch Moist's hands carefully, was about to go back to the jeweler and try to sell for $75 a shiny brass ring with a glass stone that was worth 50 pence of anybody's money. The world was blessedly free of honest men and wonderfully full of people who believed they could tell the difference between an honest man and a crook. He tapped his jacket pocket. The jailers had taken the map off of him, of course, probably while he was busy being dead. It was a good map, and studying it, Mr. Wilkins and Son and his chums would learn a lot about description, geography, and devious cartography. They wouldn't find in it the whereabouts of 150,000 and more Porcian dollars in mixed currencies, though because the map was a complete and complex fiction. However, Moist entertained a wonderful warm feeling inside to think that they would for some time possess that greatest of all treasures, which is hope. Anyone who couldn't simply remember where he stashed his great big fortune, well, he deserved to lose it, in Moist's opinion. But for now, he'd have to keep away from it, while having to look forward to it. Moist didn't even bother to note the name of the next town it had an inn, and that was enough. He took a room with a view over a disused alley, checked that the window opened easily, ate an adequate meal, and had an early night. Not bad at all, he thought. This morning he'd be on a scaffold with the actual noose around his actual neck. Tonight, he was back in business. All he needed to do now was grow a beard again and keep away from Ankh-Morpork for 6 months. Maybe only 3. Moist had a talent. He'd also acquired a lot of skills so completely that they were second nature. He'd learned to be personable, but something in his genetics made him completely unmemorable. He had the talent for not being noticed, for being a face in a crowd. People had difficulty describing him. He was about 20, or was it about 30? On what reports across the continent, he was anywhere between about 6 foot 2 inches and 5 feet 9 inches tall, hair all shades from mid-brown to blonde, and his lack of distinguishing features included his entire face. He was about average. What people remembered was the furniture, things like spectacle and mustaches, so he always carried a selection of both. They remembered names and mannerisms too. He had hundreds of those. Oh, and they remembered that they'd been richer before they met him. At 3 a.m, the door burst open. It was a real burst, bits of wood clattered off the wall, but Moist was already out of bed and diving for the window before the first of one of them hit the floor. It was an automatic reaction that owed nothing to thought. Besides, he checked before lying down. There was a large water barrel outside that would break his fall. It wasn't there now. Whoever had stolen it had not stolen the ground it stood on, however, and it broke Moist's fall by twisting his ankle. He pulled himself up, keening softly in agony, and hopped along the alley, using the wall for support. The inner stables were around the back. All he had to do was pull himself up onto a horse. Any horse. "Mr. Lipwick," a big voice bellowed. Oh gods, it was a troll. It sounded like a troll, a big one too. He didn't know you got any down here outside the cities. "You can't run and you can't hide, Mr. Lipwick." Hold on. He hadn't given anyone his real name to anyone in this place, had he? But all this was background thinking. Someone was after him, and therefore he would run. Or, hop. He risked a look behind him when he reached the back gate to the stables. There was a red glow in his room. Surely they weren't torching the place over a matter of a few dollars. That would be stupid. Everyone knew that if you got lumbered with a good fake, you palmed it off onto some sucker as soon as possible, didn't they? There was no helping some people. His horse was alone in the stable and seemed unimpressed to see him. He got the bridle on while hopping on one foot. There was no point to bother with the saddle. He knew how to ride without it. Hell, once he'd ridden without pants too, but luckily all the tar and feathers helped him stick to that horse. He was a world champion of leaving any town in a hurry. He went to lead the horse out of the stall and heard the clink. He looked down and kicked some straw away. There was a bright yellow bar joining 2 short lengths of chain with a yellow shackle attached, one to each leg. The only way this horse would go anywhere was by hopping, just like him. They clamped it. They bloody clamped the horse. "Oh, Mr. Lipwick," the voice boomed out across the stable yard. "Do you want to know the rules, Mr. Lipwick?" He looked around in desperation. There was nothing in here to use as a weapon. In any case, weapons made him nervous, which was why he never ever carried one. Weapons raised the ante far too high. It was much better to rely on a gift for talking his way out of things, confusing the issue, and if that failed, some well-soled shoes and a cry of, "Look what's over there!" But he had a definite feeling that while he could talk as much as he wanted, out here, no one was going to listen. After speeding away, he'd just have to rely on a hop. There was a yard broom and a wooden feed bucket in the corner. He stuck the head of the broom under his armpit to make a crutch, grabbed the bucket handle as heavy footsteps thudded toward the stable door. When the door was pushed open, he swung the bucket as hard as he could and felt it shatter. Splinters filled the air. A moment later, there was a thump of a heavy body hitting the ground. Moist hopped over it and plunged unsteadily into the dark. Something as tough and hard as a shackle grabbed around his ankle. He hung from the broom handle for a second and then collapsed. "I have nothing but good feelings toward you, Mr. Lipwick," boomed the voice cheerfully. Moist groaned. The broom must have been kept as an ornament, because it certainly hadn't been used much on the accumulations in the stable yard. On the positive side, this meant he had fallen into something soft. On the negative side, it meant he'd fallen into something soft. Someone grabbed a handful of his coat and lifted him bodily out of the muck. "Up we get, Mr. Lipwick." "It's pronounced Lipwick, you moron," he moaned, "with a V, not a W." "Up we get, Mr. Lipwick," said the booming voice. His broom/crutch was pushed under his arm. "What the hell are you?" Lipwick managed. "I am your parole officer, Mr. Lipwick." Moist managed to turn around and looked up, and then up again into a gingerbread man's face with two glowing red eyes in it. When it spoke, its mouth was a glimpse into an inferno. "A golem? You're a damn golem!" The thing picked him up in one hand and slung him over his shoulder. It ducked into the stables, and Moist, upside down with his nose pressed against the terracotta of the creature's body, realized that it was picking up his horse in the other hand. There was a brief whinny. "We must make haste, Mr. Lipwick. You are due in front of Lord Visionary at 8 o'clock, and at work by 9. Moist groaned. "Ah, Mr. Lipwick, regrettably we meet again," said Lord Visionary. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. Moist was swaying. His ankle felt better, but it was the only part of him that did. "It walked all night, all damn night, carrying a horse as well." "Do sit down, Mr. Lipwick," said Visionary, looking up from the table and gesturing wearily to the chair. "By the way, it is a he, an honorific in this case, clearly, but I have the great hopes of Mr. Pump." Moist saw the glow on the walls as behind him the golem smiled. Visionary looked down at the table again and seemed to lose interest in Moist for a moment. A slab of stone occupied most of the table. Little carvings of dwarves and trolls covered it. It looked like some kind of game. "Mr. Pump," said Moist. Said Visionary, moving his head to look at the board from a slightly different viewpoint. Moist leaned toward the patrician and jerked a thumb in the direction of the golem. "That," he said, "is Mr. Pump?" "No," said Lord Visionary, leaning forward likewise, and suddenly completely and disconcertingly focusing on Moist. "He is Mr. Pump. Mr. Pump is a government official. Mr. Pump does not sleep, Mr. Pump does not eat, and Mr. Pump, Postmaster General, does not stop." "And that means what exactly?" "It means that if you are thinking of, say, finding a ship headed for Qa'Rajh, on the basis that Mr. Pump is big and heavy and travels only by walking pace, Mr. Pump will follow you. You have to sleep, Mr. Pump does not. Mr. Pump does not breathe. The deep abyssal plains of the oceans present no barrier to Mr. Pump. 4 miles an hour is 672 miles a week. It all adds up, and when Mr. Pump catches you..." "Ah, now," said Moist, holding up a finger. "Let me stop you there. I know golems are not allowed to hurt people." Veterinary raised his eyebrows. "Good heavens, wherever did you hear that?" "It's written on something inside their heads. A scroll or something, isn't it?" said Moist, uncertainty rising. "Oh dear," the patrician sighed. "Mr. Pump, just break one of Mr. Lipwick's fingers, if you will. Neatly, please." "Yes, your lordship." The golem lumbered forward. "Hey, no, what? Moist waved his hands wildly and knocked game pieces tumbling. Wait, there's a rule. The golem mustn't harm a human being or allow a human to come to harm." Mr. Visionary raised a finger. "Just wait one moment, please, Mr. Pump. Very well, Mr. Lipwick. Can you remember the next bit?" The next bit? What next bit?" said Moist. "There isn't a next bit." Lord Visionary raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Pump," he said. "Unless ordered to do so by duly constituted authority," said the golem. "I've never heard that bit before," said Moist. Haven't you? Said Lord Visionary in apparent surprise. I can't imagine who would fail to include it. A hammer can hardly be allowed to refuse to hit the nail on the head, nor a saw to make a moral judgment about the nature of the timber. In any case, I employ Mr. Trooper, the hangman, who, of course, you have met, and the city watch, the regiments, and from time to time other specialists who are fully entitled to kill in their own defense or in protection of the city and its interests. Veterinary started to pick up the fallen pieces and replaced them delicately on the slab. Why should Mr. Pump be any different just because he's made of clay? Ultimately, so are we all. Mr. Pump will accompany you to your place of work. The fiction will be that he is your bodyguard as befits a senior government official. We alone will know that he has additional instructions. Golems are highly moral creatures by nature, Mr. Lipwick, but you may find their morality a shade, old-fashioned. Additional instructions, said Moist. And would you mind telling me exactly what his additional instructions are? Yes. The patrician blew a speck of dust off a little stone troll and put it on the square. And? Said Moist after a pause. Veterinary sighed. Yes, I would mind telling you exactly what they are. You have no rights in this matter. We have impounded your horse, by the way, since it was used in the committal of a crime. This is cruel and unusual punishment, said Moist. Indeed, said Veterinary. I offer you a light desk job, comparative freedom of movement, working in the fresh air. No, I feel that my offer might well be unusual, but cruel. I think not. However, I believe down the cellars we do have some ancient punishments which are extremely cruel, and in many cases also quite unusual, if you would like to try them for the purposes of comparison. And of course, there's always the option of dancing the sizzle two-step. The what? Said Moist. Drumnut leaned down and whispered something in his master's ear. Oh, I apologize, said Veterinary. I meant, of course, the hemp fandango. It is your choice, Mr. Lipwick. There is always a choice, Mr. Lipwick. Oh, and by the way, do you know the second interesting thing about angels? What angels? Said Moist, angry and bewildered. Oh dear, people just don't pay attention, said Veterinary. Remember, the first interesting thing about angels I told you yesterday, I expect you were thinking about something else. The second interesting thing about angels, Mr. Lipwick, is that you only ever get one.